So the first step in this process is going to be just looking at your object for a minute and really getting a sense of the shape and any other parts. So as you can see, we've got a mix of cylindrical forms and cubic forms. And we're going to use a combination of both additive and subtractive drawing, which we went over last week. If you guys remember this, we talked about how additive is building one section at a time and building on to a form. Subtractive means you build the entire block first and then you start taking parts away. So we're going to do a combination of both of these. All right, so we want a block that's going to pretty much, and you can even see it here on this example. Like you can see how like a single block of wood was used to make this, and then they took a router or a lathe or something and cut all those parts out. All right, so we're going to just make the block. This is where the subtractive part's going to come in, and then we'll add on the wheels. All right, so we want to, look at this basic shape here. That'll come into play in a minute. But first, I'm going to just try to make a block that is about this length and this width. I'm going to have it set off to the side here. But remember, you want a nice 3/4 view. You want to be able to see, like when you're drawing it, you want to see it kind of angled like this so you can see this side, the front side, and then the top. In any kind of isometric drawing, that's what you're going for. So I'm going to start down here towards the bottom of the page, and I'm just going to make my anchor line right about there. I'm going to keep my mark making pretty loose and sketchy. This is really a guessing process in the beginning. You don't know exactly how big to make the box. You're just sort of looking at the object and guesstimating. Last period, I made the box a little too wide, so I'm going to try to not do that this time. Make it fairly skinny, something like that. The nice thing about this is that if for some reason it is a little off, you can fix it. It's not written in stone. All right, so this is pretty much what I want. Remember, anything on the same axis is going to be parallel with each other. So all these diagonal lines going this way are parallel. All the ones this way going are parallel. And then finally, up and down. Go up about as far as you think you need to for the highest part of your object. I think that's going to be somewhere in there. Again, the top is parallel with the bottom. I am kind of moving my whole arm up through my shoulder as I draw these lines. It's helping me keep it fairly straight. But again, my line is a little sketchy here. It's okay if it is. But also note that I've started my drawing way down here to account for the length of the object. If I started up any higher, it'd be getting cut off. All right, so now that once you have your box drawn, let's go back to the object and look at this shape. The shape of the body, how it kind of, the roof is about here, but then it comes down to the back, comes down to the front for the windshield, the little dirt scooper part down here, back bumper, okay? So we want to basically replicate this shape, this flat shape, on this side of our box, and then project through to the other side. So in essence, what we're doing is that subtractive method where just as in the real object, you start out with a block of wood and then you start taking parts away. This is like the equivalent of our block of wood. So I'm just going to kind of mark off a few areas to help me. I'm not going to just start drawing. And come in about here. And we go down about there. All right, now I can just start to slowly sketch that out. Make any little fixes or tweaks that you feel are necessary. Pretty much like that. And I'm seeing the top of that just up a little higher than what I had in the box. All right, so that's pretty close. This is pretty close to that, I feel. All right, so now the next step is going to be drawing through the form. Remember, we talked about this a lot last week. So you want to basically push through to the back side of the box. So at every corner, at every point here, even on these back edges that you can't see through, you're going to project through the form. But you got to keep your lines parallel to the rest of the box. So remember, if we're going this direction, we've got to be parallel to this axis. This x-axis. And as long as you're doing that, you might have some lines that overlap, that's fine. There we go. Now, once we've done that, we're going to draw this same shape on the back side of the box, on the opposite side. So we're going to use these lines that we just used to draw through. Okay, so without too much difficulty, we have managed to sketch out the basic shape of the body. So now all that's left is to do the wheels. So again, let's go back, refer back to the object. We want to look at where the center of the wheel is in relation to everything else. So if we just imagine a straight line going up from the center of the wheel, we're going to see that this front wheel lines up about there on the object, and the back wheel about there. So, in relation to our drawing, that means we're going to put a mark about there, and then a mark about here. All right, do you see how you have to reference, you have to use these visual landmarks just like we've done in all the other drawings? And then we're going to put our wheel about there, because you can also see that the center of the wheel is just above the bottom of the car. So there's the center of the wheels. Was I not speaking English earlier?
No, I was like coughing. Okay.
All right, once you have the center worked out, you basically, remember we talked last week about drawing ellipses and you have to draw the squares first? So what we're going to do to make these wheels is we're going to draw squares around these points so that this will mark the center. And when we draw the squares, we've got to make them parallel to everything else we've been doing. So when you're drawing a square, and I've seen this happen a lot, like people will have their box at an angle like this. And then for some reason, when they come to do the wheels, they do the wheels like this, like regular squares. You've got to make these squares also parallel to everything else. They can't just be like regular squares. All right, so when you're doing this, make sure that the top and the bottom go parallel with everything else on that axis. And use this, you can kind of use your pencil and kind of figure out, okay, if that's where the front wheel is, the back wheel is going to come up about there. The bottom wheel, the back wheel of the bottom is going to come up about there. And you kind of just have to look at the object and figure out, is that the right size? Do I need to make it go a little bigger, a little smaller? That looks about right to me. Now here's the part where it can get confusing. You're going to draw through to the back. And then come up from that back edge and draw a back to this box. Imagine, even though these are 4 separate objects, if you look at the bottom, you can see that these wheels line up perfectly. So we can draw them as one cylinder going all the way through the form, and then we can kind of cut them off. All right, so that way they'll line up. Because it's part of the object. What we are doing in this kind of a drawing is we are studying the structure of an object. So that means that you've got to include all the pieces of that object, even if you can't see them, because they're still there, right? They're still part of the object. All right, so do the same with the back. Now this part gets a little tricky because you've got all these overlapping lines. So you've really, really got to concentrate when you're doing this. You can't be talking to your friends. You can't be going on your phone, goofing around. You've got to really focus on what you're doing, or it'll be really easy for you to get confused and lose your place. Now, behind each of these squares that you just drew, you are going to draw another. So you're going to extend this out a little bit and draw another square behind that one. And you're going to draw another square behind this one. So you'll have 4 sets of 2 squares each, and they will be kind of overlapping each other. So you should have something like that. And again, the centers of your squares should be aligned as well. Now, the last step is we're going to subdivide. You guys remember this from last week. Horizontally and vertically. Carry through to the back side and do the same on that back square. See how that center axis lines up? Do the same thing. Then on the back as well. And again, I know this is kind of a lot of lines, but you just takes practice. Now the final step is drawing the ellipses. So just take it one at a time. Draw the front first. And then the back. And if you've done it correctly, you should have two ellipses that are the same size, same shape, that you can just connect, okay? An ellipse is not this. Do not draw your square and then do that, okay? The ellipse has to fill out the entire box. It has to just touch, just skim the points of that, okay? If you want to draw a smaller one inside, then you draw a smaller box within a box and do it that way. An ellipse is also not a football. It's not some kind of mutated lopsided egg. It's not one of these kind of things, right? It's got to be a nice, smooth, straight ellipse. If you're still not good at this, you just need to practice it more. And again, if you've done everything correctly and all of your squares are parallel, everything's smooth, you should just be able to plug these into place and have everything lined up. Wheels should be lined up, should be the same size, same proportions. Okay? Now it's just a matter of using some line quality, like which we've talked about. Remember, in a normal drawing, you might erase a lot of these construction lines. You wouldn't really even necessarily have to draw like all these steps and like draw the squares before the ellipses, okay? But in this kind of drawing, remember, it's a process and a style. In this style of drawing, you've got to show all of these steps. As tedious as it might seem. But this really will teach you a lot about how to look. You'll never look at objects the same way again after you do this enough times. And it really will help inform your drawing in a huge way. A lot of students will struggle with this at first, but once they really get it, their drawing improves tenfold. All right, so I'm not erasing anything. I'm just making certain lines a little bit darker. If you want to leave these wheels on the back side a little bit lighter, that's fine. But they should still be visible. And believe me when I tell you, I'm pretty good at being able to tell if somebody tries to draw the car first and then tries to add the lines in later. It never works. So please do it this way. Do the steps in order the way I'm showing you. And you can go back and accentuate certain lines. Like if some lines get a little lost, you can bring them back a little bit as needed, just to kind of show. All right, and that's basically it. So when you're finally done, that's your little bulldozer. Okay? Any questions? What? When's it due? I'd like for these to be done by Friday, but we'll see. We might have to go into Monday of next week. Okay? So,
Just throwing one.